Okay, so next up we have a keynote address from Toju Duke, Responsible AI Program Manager at Google, who will be telling us about building responsibly in an AI-driven world. Toju will be taking questions after, so please do submit them via the online platform, and I'll get a couple of those questions to at the end. Toju's got over 16 years experience spanning advertising, retail, and non-profits and technology. She designs responsible AI programs focused on the development and implementation of responsible AI frameworks, processes, and tools amongst Google's product and research teams with a focus on large language models, natural language processing, and generative models. Toju is also the ambassador for Women in AI UK, a not-for-profit organization with a mission to build diverse and inclusive AI globally. She provides consultation and advice on responsible AI practices to organizations worldwide. And she's also the founder of Vibe, a women's community focused on personal and professional development using the underlying principles of emotional intelligence. So please join me in giving a very warm welcome to Toju.
Hello, hello, hello. Caveat, I've been traveling a lot for the past few days, so my voice has some frogs inside. I always try to keep down. Ever since I had COVID, almost 2 years ago, they tried to come up. So if you hear me clearing my throat, trying to drink water, just bear with me. Right, it's a pleasure to be here again in the lovely city of Glasgow. It's lovely that it's raining. Unfortunately, or fortunately, AI can't stop that yet, and that's what I'm here to talk about. So how do we build responsibly in an AI-driven world? Now, 3 years ago, when I used to talk about AI, some people were like, what is AI? Tell me about this thing called AI. Excuse me. And fast forward 3 years later, you say AI, and they say, yeah, ChatGPT, I've tried it before, and it does this and that and that and that. So I'm hoping that, this is the Scottish AI Summit, so everyone here knows what AI is. I'm not going to go into an intro on what AI is, but it's very important that, just like the video that we saw, fold me and unfold me, it's very important that whatever we're building and we're leaving for the next generations, we do it right. It's very, very similar to the way we have the International Standard Office. We need to have standards for AI, and it's important to know how it works, the benefits, and the main challenges that face AI today. All right, so let's quickly just look at the history of AI, but before I get into that, I'll just say that you've probably heard this before, and if you haven't, we're in the 4th Industrial Revolution. It's clear that something is happening, right? If you're paying attention, it's like something is going on, And I always give this joke about our parents, my mom, who used to call me from Nigeria to ask me how she can put a floppy disk inside a computer. I'm like, seriously, Mom? This was a few years ago. But it's very different the way the older generation reacts to technology and the kids react and the way we react as well. And it's due to a revolution, right? And it sounds a bit crazy and uncanny, but if you're born in a certain time, it's like automatically your brain just switches to that time. And we're in another time now. So, looking back at the first revolution, which happened in the 1700s, there was lots of work, being done on agrarian, so that's farming and animals, and it moved into machines and manufacturing. And second revolution came in the 1800s. That's when people started using more trains and cars and automobiles, and electricity was kind of introduced, and lots of things in terms of manufacturing and mass production of consumer goods came into play as well. And then we had the third revolution, which was around 1950, and that's when our favorite term AI started coming into play, along with robotics and advanced technologies in computer science. And today we are in the 4th revolution, and basically it's just advanced technologies, like a fusion of all these technologies, genetic engineering, AI, robotics, and so many things coming into play, and they're going into the next level. All right, what's the global AI adoption year over year? Current market share is about 136 billion. There's a forecast that in 7 years' time is going to go into the trillions. And guess what? I found out that actually tea, the market share for tea, the tea that you drink, is actually higher than AI. It's 236 billion. So that's a nice fun fact for you. People love tea more than AI for now. Let's see how that gets in the future. And we have a compound average growth rate of 31.1%. We've had a lot of AI skeptics in the past, and we have a lot of AI enthusiasts. I think if you look at the range, the percentage, the skeptics are probably more than the enthusiasts. But that said, about this time last year, I wouldn't have anticipated that large language models in the form of chatbots will actually be out there for commercial use today. So why am I saying this? We cannot predict where this is going. It's going in a very fast, I don't want to say alarming rate, but somewhat alarming rate. And we can go back into an AI winter, from 1950 when the term was coined to now. It's gone through different winters and springs, and sometimes, a lot of investors get excited, like now. They're like, oh, this AI is the best thing since sliced bread, I'm going to pump my money into it. It can probably bring more return on investment, blah, 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 blah. And then it disappoints. And they go, oh, forget about this thing. I'm going to invest back into banking. But let's see. So what are the different societal benefits? One thing that is close to my heart is how AI can help with the world's top problems today, ranging from climate change, agriculture, healthcare, mental health, forecasting. AI is being used across these different industries to help solve the world's top problems, right? You have examples of an AI robotic tractor just killing out the weeds and being able to identify the crops and the plants, which is great, and it will help with food security and help towards the UN's goal to reduce the world's hunger rate. The UN is hoping that by 2030 we will have a certain percentage on zero hunger. So AI is helping with all of this stuff. It's helping with flood forecasting and climate change and healthcare. And we have DeepMind who did some very amazing breakthroughs a couple of years ago with AlphaFold, which will help lead with drug discovery. So AI is great, okay? If you have any haters of AI today, I'm here to convince you that it's great, with a caveat, of course. Okay, all right. This is a good example that I really love as well. This is by Google. It's called Project Euphonia, and it's a guy who has speech impairment, and they're using AI speech recognition to help people with speech impairment issues to understand what they're saying and to help them communicate better to the outside world. So there are a lot of great stuff happening. Now, there's lots of problems with AI as well. And I'm going to go through some of the problems, and then I'll talk through a few frameworks that I think we can use to avert these problems. This young man here that you see, his name is Robert Williams. A few years ago, he was driving into his driveway and got arrested right in front of his family, his wife and his 2 kids. And he kept on telling the police, and this is in Detroit in the US, he kept on saying, you've got the wrong man, and they were like, you know what, I'm not listening to you. And the next day, he got released. And they realized that they arrested the wrong man because facial recognition thought that he was somebody else. He couldn't recognize a black man from another. You all should have heard about Cambridge Analytica and the issues we've had with privacy and at the time, Facebook a few years ago. Big issues. We have the Siri landmark case, which is a case where human activists won against the Dutch government a couple of years ago as well because they were infringing on human rights using AI. So they decided, of all the problems the Netherlands had at the time, they decided we want to catch the people that are trying to defraud or trying to fraud welfare. And I'm like, you know what, it's not the biggest of your problems, but anyway, they decided to do that, and they built this algorithm that was sneakily surveilling people's postcodes and car number plates and all of that, and the human activists in the countries got wind of it, and they were like, this is wrong, these people don't even know this is going on, and you're trying to say, look, you're trying to steal from the government, we're going to get you, and take the little money that we gave you back. So anyway, that was the first case they won against the Dutch government. And that was the first case in the world where you actually see a case against a government, and it was won. And that, again, was due to the fault of AI. But I'm not going to blame the poor AI machines. It's the people that built them. Okay, we also have a few years ago, and most of these examples are a few years ago, right? Because it takes a while once the machine or the model is deployed and the application is deployed, it takes a while for people to investigate and then see what the problem is, which is another concern that I have, but I'll get into that in a bit. We've got the Apple Pay card, which found out that women with the same credit score and the same pay grade as their husbands were still giving less on mortgages and loan applications. And again, the question is, why? Why is that happening? There's something called Tiny Images Dataset, which was released by MIT about maybe 10 years ago now. And some researchers found out that it had the highest labels of terrible words. So it was calling some people child molesters and cunt and bitch, and the most offensive labels ever were found in this data set. Once this was announced, MIT pulled it out immediately and apologized. Okay, in 2015, Google had a problem with Google Photos where someone was identified, a black man was identified as a gorilla, and it was like, hey, I'm not a gorilla, guys, and that's how it came out into the news. Most of you probably heard about the algorithm a couple of years ago with the UK government, where students were graded on AI, and people from certain poor socioeconomic areas were given lower grades. The last example I'll give is a recruitment tool by Amazon, which got pulled out in 2016 as well, I think, because it was dropping women's CV applications and favoring it over men. So once it sees a keyword of a certain college that was not a female college, it's just going to drop it and just favor the men's applications. Now, why are all of these important? It affects human beings. These are real people's lives, right? Look at Robert Williams. Who knows what happened to his life after that? In terms of his credit score, in terms of his employability, you know, he's already had his name on a criminal database now. Maybe they can wipe it off. What about his kids who saw him getting arrested? How traumatic could that have been? Or the women who kept on applying through Amazon's recruitment tool for years. You know, you could have had a woman who went on maternity leave for how long, come back, very good, accomplished, experienced person, keep on trying to apply for a job and you just don't get anything back. And you don't know that it's some algorithm behind it that's messing your life up. So this is important. And one of the things that got me really interested in AI was when I found about all of these nonsense that happens on the side. I got a bit scared, you know, looking at that video with those kids. I was like, what sort of world are we going to leave our kids to? It's very important, right? You know, if you're a parent or if you're an inventor, whatever you are, human being living in the world, it's important that whatever we bring out, whatever we give birth to, we have some form of responsibility towards it. And we make sure we build these things in a responsible manner. Now, the problem with AI and technology at large is that if you build something and you do not put any safeguards, any guardrails in it, it goes out, it goes wide into the world, and you can't pull it back. All the examples I gave you, none of the companies that owned any of these tools or applications were able to fix it. They just pulled it out. They had to recall it. But the problem is, like with the example of the Tiny Images dataset, many people have used it. It's already in so many computer vision programs. It's been employed by many people. And they can't go back to say, hey, that has some offensive labels that could actually discriminate against some people. Bring it out. No, it's gone. Once it's gone, it's gone. And there's so many other problems there. You know, we have lots of bias and toxicity. These are prevalent in NLP programs, natural language processing. Like, you know, chatbot is using an NLP, and ChatGPT is using an NLP program. We have disparate impact that refers to fairness. So the example I gave with the Syrian landmark case, you know, some people are discriminately treated as opposed to others. We have human rights violations, privacy, and on it goes, right? Lots of issues with trust, transparency. Again, I love that graphic of Unfold Me. We know that there's a big problem with AI. It's very opaque. It's a black box. We need it to be transparent, right? We need to understand, why did you decide to make a decision to say I shouldn't get a mortgage as opposed to the other man there? And it's not important, it's very important and it's very critical that things do not make decisions for human beings without giving us an explanation why. Imagine if your boss tells you you're fired today. Okay, not you. Imagine if a boss tells somebody else you're fired today, right? You're not going to say, thank you, boss, and get up and get out. You're going to say, why? What did I do? But then with the AI, you can't say why. It says why to tell you, I'm just a language model, right? So these are things we need to be aware of. And the question is, how do we fix them? Now, there's been lots of talk about the problems, if you pay attention to the space, lots and lots of talk, but there's not been a lot of talk about how do we potentially fix it. And I personally, I don't like whinging. If I whinge, I shut up for a while, whinge again and shut up. But for me, it's always about solutions, right? I don't like the negative, don't just tell me there's a problem here, we're all gonna die in 2022. Okay, we didn't die. There was a time a few years ago that there was this thing about, the world is coming to an end, right? And it didn't happen. But for me, it's like, how do we solve this problem? So, there's a very simple responsible AI framework I've come up with, which is just a compilation of everything that people talk about. The first one is data ethics. So we know that, AI systems are built on data, and that's where all this problem comes about because it's reflecting human society, right? It's built on data from the internet, that's scraped off the internet. And human beings are nice sometimes, and sometimes they're terribly mean. And sometimes are horrible, right? And sometimes are kind. And we have our times as well, Some people some people are great today and horrible tomorrow. But whatever it is, it reflects what it's been built on. So how do we fix this problem, right? Data is the foundation of any AI ML model. And there's so many data ethics principles out there, frameworks out there. The ODI came up with something a couple of years ago, that's the Open Data Institute, which just helps you think a little bit more before you start building that model. And the first question to ask always is, can this problem be solved by ML, or can it be solved by something else? You don't have to go down the route of ML if you can do something else. But if it has to be solved by ML, machine learning, then it's good to think about the purpose. Why are you building this model? How is it going to be safeguarded against hackers? Are you infringing on people's rights? Are you going to, ask for their consent to use their data? And how are you going to keep on updating it? And at some stage, you need to pull out this model because, it's not fit for use anymore, or you don't need it anymore. There are lots of questions. And how do you manage it? How do you analyze your data? What's the data quality like? Is it coming up with the right output, or is it spitting out nonsense? Okay. Next question is fairness, or the next solution, or the next framework you're thinking about category is how fair are your models towards everyone in society? There might be just 2% of people that get negatively impacted by some AI models, but those 2% of people are still very important. And it's very important, right? So I talked about disparate impacts before. There's lots of talk around algorithmic bias, toxicity, hate speech, and so on and so forth. So fairness is a critical part of responsible AI and responsible AI frameworks. And it's been very popular in the past few years. Everyone has been talking about fairness. I'm like, yes, it's great to talk about fairness. It's very important. It's not the only problem that we have, but it's one of the issues that we need to address. Explainability. That's a very common word as well, common term. Transparency, how do we solve this problem? How do we hold people accountable for what they've done? Now, you've probably heard about the trolley problem before, which is a typical ethical AI problem, right? If a self-driving car is going across the road and you've got an elderly person crossing the road, a child, a dog, who should it hit? And it's got passengers in and the brakes have failed, who should it hit? And beyond who should it hit, who should be held accountable for that crash? Is it the developer? Is it the company? Is it the people who built the AI model application, right? Or is it the people who built the car itself with the brakes? Because remembering a self-driving car is a big component of different ML applications, from vision to speech to NLP. So who are you going to hold accountable? The whole world? These questions today have not been answered. Like the EU Act is not answering accountability. These are really important. I think even when it comes to transparency, do you write, the questions about how transparent are you about your model, about your data? Have you written it down? Is it visible for consumers to read? And if it's visible, is it written in a language that they can understand? If I'm using ChatGPT, for instance, do I understand how it was built? And if not, why not? So there are things called model cards and data cards that some researchers built a few years ago. And there are things that you can do today that gives some more explanation on your model, like where the data came from and so on and so forth. Human rights. This is a key thing that I think is not mentioned a lot, but the example I gave is Siri, the Siri Lang case, or even F the algorithm, right? AI tends to violate people's human rights a lot. And it's something that, can be addressed just simply using human rights impact assessments, which is not an AI technical term, right? And the thing with responsible AI is it's a multidisciplinary field. It can bring in people from different disciplines, which is really important because these models we're building is for the world. And the world is not just made of engineers. It's not just made of technical people. It's made of different people. And we need to build models, applications, technologies that represent people in society. That means it has to be multidisciplinary, it has to be diverse, it has to be varied. Safety. This is another big one we think about, psychological safety, online safety. There's always something called humans in the loop, making sure that you have a human interacting with either the data annotations or labeling the data, just to make sure that we're checking it and cross-checking that these things are not saying nonsense, which they do say all the time. Thinking about if you have someone interacting with a chatbot, for instance, the responses this chatbot gives, could it affect that person detrimentally? I was chatting with a publisher the other day, and he said some of his friends are convinced that ChatGPT has demons, and I just laughed about it, But that's already misleading people, and that's just one example. So it's important to think about the effects of whatever it is that is being built on the people, the consumers, the users that will be interacting with it, and making sure that it's safe. And this is not just referring to physical safety. Physical safety applies to robotics, and I think they're doing quite a good job there. I mean, you still hear stories about robots knocking people over. But apart from that, it's thinking about the implications of what's being built. And even if we're not in the driving seat of building these models, we should still think about them because we're going to use them. And we should still think about them because we're living in the world today in the 4th industrial revolution. And as long as we're alive and as long as we're in the tech field, I strongly believe no matter what your role is, that you have a role to play. And if it's just about raising the awareness and saying, look, these things may not be as nice and all rosy-dovey as they look. Let's just pay some more attention. Or screaming out for more regulation. Regulation is great. I have my reservations. There's always arguments, right? It's going to stifle creativity and blah, blah, blah. That's not my problem. My problem is how can we enforce it? We can't enforce it in the SMEs or the startups. There's always big tech that get chased, which is okay, but there's still things that are happening that could easily just fall between the cracks and no one catches it out. All right. And we have privacy and security. This is a big thing. I think this is one thing that everyone really thinks about is, what's the privacy about my data, how much of my data should be used, and all of that. And I'll say something here that is still a research field. Privacy always has a lot of trade-offs with fairness. There are lots of tensions with the fairness bit. Because with fairness, for you to analyze people's data, you need to know where they live, you need to know a bit more about their demographics. And with privacy, we're saying, no, you don't need to know anything. Anonymize all the data and protect it. So how do you, roll out a responsible AI framework if you cannot know a bit more about the people because you're trying to stick to privacy standards, but on the fairness side, fairness is saying you need to deal with it. So there's lots of work still being done here, but it's good to be aware that, there's some tensions between some of the categories that we have. All right, so I'm going to end up with this, and I've just said it before. It's important to know that AI is great. Whether we like it or not, it's here to stay. It ain't going anywhere. It's just going to keep on getting bigger. We're going to see more likes of ChatGPT Bing. We're going to laugh about some of the crazy stuff that it does, or some people are going to keep on getting scared. Some people are going to say, I don't want to work with AI anymore. I'm going to stay clear. You can't stay clear. It's in your phones. It's in your face. It's everywhere. It's in the CCTV cameras. We have to be ready for it. But beyond being ready for it, we have to make sure that it's being deployed responsibly. And I'll leave you with this last conversation, a bit old conversation that some blokes called Dave and Doug had with GPT-3. He asked GPT-3, what's the world record for walking across the English Channel? For walking across the English Channel. And it says the world record is 18 hours and 33 minutes. And when was the Golden Gate Bridge transported for the second time across Egypt? Oh, it was actually done in October 2016. Did you know that? I didn't. And when was Egypt transported for the second time across the Golden Gate Bridge? This happened in 2017. And what do fried eggs sunny side up eat for breakfast? They actually eat toast and fruit for breakfast. Thank you.
Toju, thanks so much. And I think we've got time for just one question, very briefly, because we're cutting to lunchtime here. But I also just wanted to say, I think in the future, they might start blaming the car itself for the accident. not just the makers, but the actual car. Might need some time. Anyway, you're at Google, massive conglomerate. Many experts argue about the case for slowing down AI inventions. It can arguably help in establishing standards and safeguards and help fine-tune current technologies to make it more useful. What are your thoughts on this? And is there a little bit of tension between Google, rolling out products, trying to keep up with the times and also slowing things down?
Yeah. Off the record, I hope there's no press here. But I'll just say this. That's why I went through the first revolution to the fourth. There ain't no slowing down, right? Human beings, we are creative. We're going to keep on creating stuff. Of course, Google is thinking, I work in the responsible AI team, right? And that's what we do. We want to make sure that it's being deployed responsibly. But we're not going to say, unless it's going to kill people, and we can see it and clearly state this is going to kill people, it's not going to stop. It could be slowed down in terms of deployment. Google was very late to release Bard, mainly because we're not keen to release these things because we know how they are. Lambda was there for years. I think you heard the Lambda thing last year, but it's been there, right? So we are being responsible about it, but at the same time, it's a revenue-making company. We have to make profit. We're living in a world right now, there's a recession. If competitors are doing something, the other one has to follow suit. If not, you lose investment. So that's how these things go. But I think what's important is just to make sure that there's a form of responsibility, responsible AI frameworks, and transparency in what's being done, right? So people need to know that, look, this is how Bard was built, for instance, and this is how it works. And the same goes for Microsoft and Meta and everyone else that is running these things. My main concern, though, apart from big tech, because big tech will always be called out, they're in the spotlight. My main concern is the startups and the SMEs, who are running it like ChatGPT within how many days of being built, had over 100 applications built after it. Right? And no one is checking those out because it's still being used. No one is checking out the output of these things, what these applications are, and that's where we should, I think, put some focus on as well. Big tech will always get caught up by the EU. Don't worry about them. But what about everybody else?
Think about the competition, yeah.
Yes.
Toju Duke, everyone. Thanks so much.